Beyond Limits. Expanding minds. Opening hearts. Connecting into oneness. All right, so we're talking about the principle in the law is unlimited. Unlimited. That's Ernest Holmes saying that. He wrote that in his correspondence course back in the 1920s. Tell me what you think that says.
Well, for me, it's interesting. I'm right now doing a course on the book of New Earth. And in the book, The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, he talks about the idea that the ego likes to label things. And the second you label something, you put it in a box. So the second I label myself as a minister, I'm labeled by what society has put around that box, and I become limited. And I label myself as a minister, I label myself as a husband, I label myself as a father, a grandfather, and you get all these labels, and then you realize that there's this picture that those labels present, and most people don't realize it, and they don't have the freedom to say, wait a second, I can be anything else I want to be outside of those labels.
Yeah, right. And in fact, the labels are the ego structure that's we've talked about before is the personality. And most people believe themselves to be the personality. I'd say 99% of the world believes they're the personality. And so principle being unlimited is beyond the ego. And what Ernest is talking about in terms of principle is he's saying there's a law in the universe. The law in the universe is there is consciousness, and what is moving in consciousness through thought reflects back to the individual. And that consciousness is unlimited. Therefore, if you are putting into consciousness what it is you want created, its unlimited capability sends it back to you in a manifest form. I've been doing a film on imagination, and so many talk about Bucky Fuller, who was a great inventor, said imagination is key to everything. Einstein said imagination is more powerful than any thought. And Neville Goddard, who is very much into the whole thing of imagination, who taught at with Ernest Holmes and Christian Larson at the center in Los Angeles. That was back in the days when it was called the Institute for Science of Mind and Spirit, or the Institute of Religious Science. And they're all saying the same thing. Imagination is a form of the thought process that's impregnating consciousness, and that creates. The key to that is the amount of feeling that you have. Hold on. All the phones are going. The telemarketers are out in force. So the amount of feeling that you have determines how fast what you want to create is going to create. I know a lot of the students that I've had in the past, what they've done is they've got it in mind, but they have no feeling associated with it. And so the power is unlimited. So that's the reason why we can say that the power is unlimited. Your power is unlimited. My power is unlimited.
And Larry, it's not just that it's unlimited. We don't know how it's going to work. We don't know how that power is going to create what you want. So I'm going to go back to an issue you and I were talking about, is that I went to the doctor today because I had hip replacement surgery, and one of my legs now is shorter than the other. And I knew something had to be done. I knew it had to be. I didn't know what. I did a spiritual mind treatment before I went to bed last night, that there was a fix to this without them pulling out my whole hip, redoing the entire surgery, and that type of thing. And when I woke up this morning, I knew it was going to happen. So when I went into the doctor and I said, Doc, the leg's a little shorter. He said, yep. I said, so what can you do about it? He said, well, you can live with it. I said, no, what can you do about it? And he said, well, we could do surgery. I said, what does that entail? Well, he told me all he's got to do is pop the top off of a bone, put a new top on, and pop it back in. I didn't know the answer, but I knew there was an answer, and I accepted that as my answer. So for me, that was a treatment that was answered.
Sure. Sure. And I think that what you were just expressing, one of the things about imagination, and Neville talks about this, is do it just before you're going to bed. When you're in between that stage, because it impresses the subconscious, which is the stage in between you and consciousness. And it's more powerful. And gosh, I remember all the way back to the 70s when Shakti Gawain wrote a book called The Movies of Your Mind, or something to that effect. And that's one of the things she said, is its feeling makes it more powerful, and especially if it's just before nighttime. Now, where Neville got it, and where a lot of people have gotten that from, is one of the places is the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah talked about that, and that's an old book. And prior to that, the book that it was based on, which I don't remember the name of it, it talked about the same thing. So it's obviously something that's universal, that's been with us all the time, but it's always new to every new generation that comes along, it seems like. So the power to create. You created your new hip.
And the thing that I got about that, why that is important, because I asked, what is the metaphysical meaning of this? And I came to the conclusion it's all about balance. And when you look at the world today, people are not seeing balance. They're seeing this side or that side. There's no balance there. And so their mind is focused on one side, and the principle that is working all the time in our lives is creating exactly the one side that they keep focusing on. And then the other side is focusing that way. And the gap between the two keeps getting wider. And they're simply using principle. They just don't know they're using it.
Yeah, they're abusing it.
Exactly.
But that's a good point, though, because consciousness, the law, doesn't care.
That's right.
It produces no matter what. And so that's the big thing that people have to understand, is look at your life and you'll see how you're demonstrating what your mind knows and what you're thinking about all the time. As was it Emerson said, what you think about all the time is what you become.
Exactly.
So there we are. And he said also, as you're learning all of this, you'll go through successive choirs of friends, because you will begin to outgrow them in what you know and how you are. Yeah, it's this principle and the language that Ernest used and Neville used. Neville brought the language a little further along into the 50s. And then we get into the early 70s, and Shakti Gawain and Wayne Dyer started to popularize. And all they were doing was really taking the language and updating the language. But all along the way, the thing that's always happened, as it's happened in all the great books of all times, is pieces get dropped and information gets slightly skewed a different way. And what I'm finding is that the only way to really get this is you have to be able to go into the silence and basically allow it to inform you of all of this. Because we are in an information society which is overloaded with information, and it's complex. It is really complex today.
And here's the key thing that people don't really get. Information is not truth.
Correct. Absolutely.
And that is the biggest thing that people have got to understand. Information is just perception. That's all it is, through the eyes of that individual, and every individual will see that differently.
7 billion different versions of it. Yeah.
And this whole idea of principle, it is fascinating. Was it Emerson that also said, your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you say? And in him saying that, it's not just your actions. Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. So when you look at someone and their life is in shambles, realize they could be talking the greatest stuff in the world, but you're not going to believe them because they don't believe it, because their life is not a demonstration of that. Yes. And I think what people forget is that everyone's life demonstrates the hierarchy of what they value, whether they realize it or not. And most people's higher values, they are not even aware of. But yet what they do is a reflection of those values. So they're unconsciously using principle for what they value, but they've never chosen their values consciously. That's a fascinating subject in and of itself, too.
Absolutely. And in fact, as we've said many times before on this show, is our values tend to be a reflection of the values we inherited. So our parents' values, our grandparents' values, our caretakers' values, our school teachers' values, all along the way, we got a bunch of them and we just accepted them. Okay,
Yep.
those are my values. It's the same thing as, okay, I was born Catholic. Really? You were born Catholic? Same ideas. You inherited the religion and you inherit the beliefs. So all of this division we have out there is just a reflection of the beliefs that we've adopted from somewhere else. Vast majority of people have not understood their own belief system.
Just think about what just happened last night in France about the stabbings happened with the Islamic gentleman with the French people that 3 of them were killed by this individual. He is coming from where he was born, a belief structure, and he truly believes that to be the truth. And the problem we have here is that he's moved into another country and he's not begun the assimilation process. Because anytime you move into a new group, like when you move from one spiritual center to another, there's a consciousness that's different. And there's an assimilation process where you try to figure out, is this for me? Is that energy right? Am I going to be able to be without limits in this group? That's one of the things that I talk about every Sunday. I says, here at Agape, we talk about the fact that there are no limits. So we don't expect you to believe anything we say. You decide for yourself through you proving it. See, we teach that there's a principle. Here's how it works. You use it, prove it. Now you own it.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, Ernest Holmes says in the beginning of this correspondence course, he says, we don't profess to be a religion or a philosophy. We profess to teach something that you should be practicing if you want to change your life. And he says that became its own religion and its own philosophy. Fine. But that's not the point. The point is truth is only the truth when it comes from higher consciousness and is demonstrated through you appropriately. Now, we don't always demonstrate the truth. We demonstrate what we believe. And they're two different things.
Yeah, because, I define beliefs, and this is something that I've worked on for years, and I might have said this on another podcast. I'll say it again. Our beliefs are our thoughts, words, actions, and feelings aligned toward a specific result, held persistently and consistently, either consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah, that sums it up. And most powerfully, it's unconscious to us 90% of the time, if not more.
Exactly.
So using the principle means to take what it is you want to create, and this is an issue for a lot of people because they don't even know what they want. Take that, what you want, formulate it into a thought image, invest feeling into it, and I tell people, if you can't get the feeling, then find some place in your life where you've had an experience where you've had that feeling. And bring that up. And when you bring that up, bring it up into the image of what you want to create.
And Larry, your idea about people not knowing what they want, I'm finding now when I'm teaching classes, like right now we're just doing a book study basically. Mm-hmm. And in the past, I've gone over the key phrases in the book and asked people to talk about it. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm literally creating questions and I'm asking people, what do you think this means? What do you think this means? How does that affect your life? And you know what? They have a real hard time with that because everyone wants a rote answer instead of being able to think for themselves. And I've really come to the point that for me, being the best teacher I can be is to ask questions that stimulate them to think, which will stimulate them to form a new image, which will stimulate them to grow.
Do you believe that?
For me, I do, yes, without a doubt, and I believe it will help them. So that's why I'm doing it.
There you are.
I was listening to...
It's a value, right?
Yep. I was listening to YouTube between Wim Hof and Sadhguru. And this was Sadhguru's going around the United States on his motorcycle right now. And he
Oh,
was
is he?
talking, to Wim. And in the course with Wim, he said, I've got millions of people that are following me. He says, do you know how many of them listen to me and actually do the practice that I teach that will change their lives? And he said, very few.
Yeah.
And that's what's fascinating, because Wim agreed that was his experience. My experience is the same thing. Most people I talk to is people are excited about the information. They're excited about the connection, but actually doing the work daily, very few people get into that.
Very difficult because information has become an addiction in our modern society.
Yeah.
And prior to that, our ignorance, meaning we just didn't know, we weren't doing it unless we were a Shaolin in the monastery someplace, or, you had been educated as Neville was by somebody who was an Ethiopian priest, those kinds of things. But otherwise, vast majority of the people are not getting this. Amma's the same way. Amma has, tens of millions of people following her. And she says only a select few will ever get to the point to where they're able to move on with the level of what they need to be in the spiritual realms rather than having to continue to do this physical process. And I understand. I mean, practicing these kinds of things isn't easy. It's simple, but it isn't easy.
That's right.
And all we have to do is look at how the mind reacts when we sit to do a meditation, and we know how difficult that can be. On Sundays, when I ask people how many of you sit for meditation, hands go up. How many of you have trouble because your mind is going so fast? All the hands go back up. He said, how many of you are doing something different so that you can slow the mind down or make a change to it? No hands go up. Yeah.
It just fascinates me every time I'm working with someone and they're working at it. They work hard for about a month and then they disappear.
Yeah.
And they're right on the verge. I've been doing this when I became a licensed practitioner in 2004, I developed a spiritual practice and I do not deviate from that practice. And one of the things I talked about Sunday was I asked people, what percentage of your day do you believe you're truly aware? Mm-hmm. And I know in my class, some person said 10%. I said, so you're aware 2.5 hours every day. I said, you are the Dalai Lama. I want you to know that. And I said, we're lucky if most people are aware 5-10 minutes of every day. And I realized, I asked the question of myself, I said, can anyone become 100% aware while in human body? And I said, with the ego and human body, I don't believe it's possible. So then I sort of took it further. I said, so how can I live a life that's more aware? And what I came up with for myself is that build habits that you've consciously chosen that serve you, that are going to take you toward that which you seek. Because if you build the habit, that becomes something that's automatic that you don't have to think about. And that for me works. So
That's a belief.
Yep.
So you're creating the beliefs you want in order to create what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You were saying that there's very few people that have full awareness of what's going on. The demonstration of that for me was being with Amma, who is the hugging saint, and that's what people call her, in Chicago on a number of occasions over the last 12 or 15 years, she is fully aware every second. And what that means is she's not just fully aware from an ego point of view, she's fully aware from consciousness, because she can tell whatever is going on around her, and she will turn to somebody and answer a question before they ask it, turn to somebody else and say, you can come up here. At the same time, she knows the music is going on. She knows all of this that's going on. I decided to do a test of that at one point, and I think I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. And that is, I'm sitting in a line for people to come up and get a hug from her. There's probably 100 people in front of me. So it's going to take about 45 minutes to get up there. I'm sitting back there. The moment I sat down, I said, you know what? I'm going to do something. I really want to have ash put on my forehead. And that's what I thought. Now, I didn't say it to anybody around me. When I got up there, she just smiled as she pulled me down and hugged me, and she put some ash right on my forehead. That's fully aware of everything that's going on, because other people have said the same thing. I went up to her and I was worried about this, and she said, don't worry about that. But I didn't even ask her. So we can be, and the point is, awareness is 100%. Otherwise, it's narrowed down according to whatever your filtration system is. When it's 100%, when you leave your body, and people who have gone through near-death experiences will say this, when you leave your body, you go from feeling like an ant to feeling like the entire universe. And you are aware of all of that. When I had my death experience, I was aware of all the conversations in the neighborhood that were going on. And every time that awareness would move, I got wider and wider reception, so to speak, of what everything was that was going on. We have that unlimited capability of awareness, but we're untrained. And as Ernest Holmes is fond of saying, an untrained mind is dangerous.
Yes.
Well, that's not the way he said it, but that's the way I've repeated it. He said a trained mind is more powerful than an untrained mind. But as we can see in current time, we have so many untrained minds that it is dangerous. Beyond Limits. Join us and ask your questions. Check our website for details on our call-in shows. Check BeyondLimitsRadio.com. That's BeyondLimitsRadio.com.